Munich in the 1700s was the beating heart of the Bavarian electorate, a city where Catholic splendor merged with the ambitions of the Wittelsbach dynasty. While Prussian Berlin was being built on military discipline, Munich was shaped by religious devotion, artistic magnificence, and a distinctly southern German spirit. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings and engravings to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. First, I want to talk about the Munich Residenz, the palace complex that served as the seat of Bavarian dukes, electors, and eventually kings for over 5 centuries. By the 1700s, the Residenz had grown into one of Europe's largest urban palaces, a sprawling complex of courtyards, halls, chapels, and galleries. It was far more than just a royal residence. It was the administrative nerve center of Bavaria, a treasury of art and culture, and a powerful symbol of Wittelsbach authority that had endured since the Middle Ages. The Residenz dominated the old city center, its wings extending in multiple directions, each generation of rulers adding new sections in the prevailing architectural style of their era. By the 18th century, Baroque and Rococo elements had transformed earlier Renaissance structures into something breathtaking. Inside, rooms were adorned with frescoes, gilded stucco, intricate woodwork, and collections of art that rivaled any European court. The antiquarium, built in the 16th century but still impressive in the 1700s, housed classical sculptures and served as a banquet hall where electors entertained visiting dignitaries. The palace's proximity to the Frauenkirche, Munich's iconic cathedral, was no accident. The twin towers of this Gothic church, topped with their distinctive onion domes, rose above the city skyline, visible from miles away. The Frauenkirche represented Munich's deep Catholic identity, a faith that had defined the city's character especially during and after the Reformation, when Bavaria remained defiantly Catholic while much of northern Germany turned Protestant. This religious commitment shaped everything about Munich. Churches weren't just places of worship, but statements of power, identity, and cultural values. The Theatinerkirche, completed in the late 1600s, brought Italian Baroque style to Munich's skyline. Its yellow facade and massive dome announced Bavarian Catholicism's confidence and grandeur, built to celebrate the birth of an heir and to thank God for the continuation of the Wittelsbach line. The Isar River runs through Munich, much as the Spree runs through Berlin, but the character of these rivers and their cities differs markedly. The Isar, fed by alpine snowmelt, flows faster and colder, its waters clear and sometimes treacherous. In the 1700s, the river provided water for breweries, power for mills, and a boundary that shaped the city's growth. Bridges connected the old city with growing suburbs, and on summer days, residents would gather along its banks. Unlike the frozen winter markets on Berlin's Spree, Munich's relationship with its river was defined by seasonal flooding and the constant alpine influence. The city looked southward toward the mountains, those peaks visible on clear days, a reminder of Bavaria's geographic position between the German-speaking lands to the north and Italy to the south. This scene shows the Marienplatz in the early 18th century, Munich's central square and the heart of civic life. The Mariensäule, or Mary's Column, erected in 1638, stood at the square's center, a monument of thanksgiving for the city's survival during the 30 Years' War. This golden statue of the Virgin Mary, standing atop a column surrounded by cherubs battling demons and serpents, embodied Munich's Catholic identity more powerfully than any building could. Around the Marienplatz, the Old Town Hall, and the beginnings of what would become the new town hall framed daily life. Markets filled the square, merchants sold goods, proclamations were announced, and executions were carried out. This was where Munich citizens gathered to celebrate, to mourn, to trade, and to witness the spectacles of power that their rulers staged. The Wittelsbach electors understood the importance of public ceremony. Religious processions wound through these streets regularly, especially during Corpus Christi, when the entire court, clergy, guilds, and citizens paraded through the city in elaborate displays of faith and hierarchy. These weren't merely religious events, but political theater, demonstrating the unity of church and state, the legitimacy of Wittelsbach rule, and Munich's place in the Catholic world. This view shows the Sendlinger Tor, one of the medieval city gates that still defined Munich's boundaries in the early 1700s. Unlike Berlin, which was rapidly expanding beyond its walls, Munich remained more compact, its growth constrained by these fortifications and by a more conservative approach to urban planning. The gates weren't just defensive structures, but customs posts where goods entering the city were inspected and taxed, a crucial source of revenue for the Bavarian treasury. Beyond the walls stretched the Au district, where working-class residents, craftsmen, and those who served the city's needs lived in simpler buildings. The social geography of Munich was clearly defined. The wealthy and powerful clustered near the Residenz and along prestigious streets, while laborers and artisans occupied peripheral areas. Now let's look at Nymphenburg Palace, the summer residence of Bavarian electors located just outside the city. Construction began in the 1660s, but by the 1700s, it had grown into a magnificent baroque complex surrounded by elaborate gardens, canals, and pavilions. If the Residenz represented political power and urban authority, Nymphenburg embodied leisure, culture, and the refined tastes of an enlightened court. The palace's central pavilion, painted in warm yellows and creams, faced perfectly symmetrical gardens designed in the French manner. Canals reflected the palace facade, creating an illusion of even greater grandeur. The stone hall inside, decorated with frescoes celebrating Bavarian rule and mythology, served as the setting for concerts, balls, and celebrations. Elector Max Emanuel, who commissioned much of Nymphenburg's expansion, had spent years in France and brought French aesthetic sensibilities back to Bavaria. The parkland surrounding Nymphenburg stretched for miles, dotted with hunting lodges, garden temples, and hidden grottos. This landscape represented controlled nature, geometry, imposed on the natural world, a very different philosophy from the wilder English gardens that would become popular later in the century. Here, as in Versailles, nature submitted to human design and princely will. This scene depicts the Viktualienmarkt area in the Idee mid-18th century, though the market wouldn't move to its current location until later. What we see here is the daily commercial life of Munich, the buying and selling that sustained the city. Unlike the grand ceremonial spaces or palatial interiors, this was where ordinary Munich residents conducted their lives. Farmers bringing produce from the surrounding countryside, butchers selling meat, bakers offering bread, and housewives bargaining for the best prices. Munich's economy in the 1700s relied heavily on brewing. The city's beer, protected by the Bavarian Purity Law of 1516, was famous throughout the German lands. Deep cellars, some carved into the hillsides around the city, provided natural refrigeration for lagering beer. The Hofbräuhaus, founded by Duke Wilhelm V in 1589, was already an institution by the 1700s, producing beer for the court and eventually serving the public. Beer wasn't just a beverage, but a crucial part of Munich's economy, identity, and social fabric. The brewing tradition connected Munich to its agricultural hinterland. Barley came from Bavarian fields, hops from nearby growing regions, and water from the alpine-fed Isar. This integration of city and countryside, of urban consumption and rural production, shaped Bavaria's economic structure and cultural identity in ways that persist even today. This image shows the Asamkirche, or Asamkirche, a masterpiece of late Baroque architecture completed in the 1730s. The Asam brothers, Egid Quirin and Cosmas Damian, built this church next to their own home as a private chapel, though it would eventually open to the public. The building represents the Baroque aesthetic at its most extreme and most glorious. Every surface is decorated, light pours through hidden windows, sculptures seem to move, and the boundary between architecture and theater dissolves completely. Inside, the ceiling fresco creates an illusion of heaven opening above the congregation, angels and saints ascending toward divine light. Gilded stucco, twisted columns, dramatic lighting, everything is designed to inspire awe, to transport worshippers beyond the mundane world into the realm of the sacred. This theatrical approach to religion was quintessentially Catholic, and specifically Southern German Catholic, a world away from the austere Protestant churches of northern Germany. The artistic patronage of the Wittelsbach court made Munich a magnet for artists, architects, and craftsmen. Italians brought baroque techniques north, while Bavarian artists developed their own interpretations. The court supported painters, sculptors, musicians, and scholars, creating a cultural environment that would eventually give rise to institutions like the Bavarian Academy of Sciences, founded in 1759. Let me show you the Michaelskirche, St. Michael's Church, completed in the early 1590s but still dominating Munich's skyline in the 1700s. This Jesuit church, with its massive barrel-vaulted nave, the largest in the world. After St. Peter's in Rome at the time of its construction, represented the Catholic Counter-Reformation's architectural response to Protestantism. Its facade, inspired by Roman churches, brought Italian Renaissance ideals to Bavaria, while its interior created space for the elaborate ceremonies and preaching that the Jesuits pioneered. The Wittelsbach rulers were buried in the crypt beneath St. Michael's, their tomb slabs bearing witness to centuries of dynastic continuity. This connection between church and dynasty reinforced the sacred nature of Wittelsbach authority. Kings ruled not merely by force or tradition, but by divine mandate, and churches like St. Michael's made that claim visible and tangible. This scene captures the Hofgarten, the court garden created in the early 1600s and carefully maintained throughout the 1700s. Here, in the Italian Renaissance style, formal pathways intersected at precise angles. Hedges were trimmed into geometric shapes, and a temple pavilion marked the garden's center. This was a space where court members could stroll, discuss politics or philosophy, and enjoy carefully cultivated nature without leaving the protection of the palace complex. The Hofgarten represented a European ideal of the garden as an extension of architecture, a green room where geometry and plants merged. It was open to certain members of the public, allowing Munich citizens occasional access to spaces usually reserved for nobility. This limited democratization of formerly exclusive spaces was characteristic of 18th century urban development across Europe. Now let's look at the fortifications that still surrounded Munich in the early 1700s. While Berlin was rapidly expanding beyond its walls, Munich remained more compact, its medieval and Renaissance fortifications still largely intact. These walls weren't merely defensive, but defined the city's legal boundaries, separated urban from rural, and controlled movement of people and goods. Towers punctuated the walls at regular intervals, and gates like the Karlstor, Sendlinger Tor, and Isar River controlled access to the city. Guards checked travelers, customs officials inspected merchandise, and tolls were collected. The walls represented order, security, and the elector's authority to define who and what entered his capital. Yet by the mid-1700s, these fortifications were becoming obsolete. Changes in warfare, artillery improvements, and the growing recognition that cities prospered through openness rather than isolation would eventually lead to their demolition. For now, this AI reconstruction is as close as I can come to that dream. If there's another German city, another moment in time, or a historic scene you'd like to see brought back to life, let me know in the comments. I'd love to keep building this journey into the past with you. Thank you so much.